For those of you who stayed after Peter's presentation, thank you. And for those of you who are just joining me, hello. So yes, I am Sara. I work with Dr. Hendricks. I work with Peter, or I have been for the last 4 years, specifically as a co-therapist on our treatment. We're looking at a psychedelic-assisted treatment for cocaine use disorder. So Peter talked a lot about like the bigger idea of what psychedelics and what a transcendent experience can be. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the application of psychedelics specifically with this population. So we are one of a handful of universities and sites around the world that are looking at psychedelics with different applications. And we are one of the sites that is looking at addiction specifically. So we chose cocaine. Well, Peter chose cocaine. I came on after. So we chose cocaine specifically because there is no pharmacological treatment for it. So we're investigating the possibility of psychedelics being hopefully useful and probably better than what we have right now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit specifically about what we're doing in this study, in the protocol, and then I'm going to share with you some of the narratives. They're beautiful, they're rich, so I hope that you have your imaginations on because they're pretty gnarly. In the current study that we are conducting, we are looking for 40 individuals. So I know I said I've been with Peter for the last 4 years, and we're about halfway there. So recruitment for this kind of work can be quite difficult. These are individuals who have a lot of contextual factors that are working against them in terms of difficulty with transportation, difficulty with scheduling. They're living quite chaotic lives. So we'll be at it for a little bit longer. So if you know anybody in the greater Birmingham area who could use some of our help, please let them know. So what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you the preliminary results that we have from the first unblinded. So this is a randomized controlled trial, which is double-blinded. So we have a placebo group. So half of the individuals receive a placebo, which is diphenhydramine, and half of our participants receive psilocybin. Everything else in the protocol is the same, and I'll talk to you a little bit more specifically about that. But the first 10 participants, we unblinded to see who received psilocybin and who received diphenhydramine, and 6 of our participants had received psilocybin, so I'm going to be talking specifically about those 6 participants. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of our protocol. It is a little bit overwhelming, but to start, what I'm going to talk about are our preparation sessions. So like I said, Peter and I are co-therapists on this work, and he is a clinical psychologist, so he has training in cognitive behavioral therapy more extensively. I am a couple and family therapist by training, so I work more with systems and relationships, individuals within an ecology, more or less. So I think that we balance each other really well. We play well off of each other, but we're in the session with our participants every single time. So in these first 4 sessions. So someone had asked in the last session something about, what is the difference between having this with a clinical application versus something more in a recreational naturalistic setting. So this is where I think there is some level of difference. Not necessarily better or worse, I don't want to put a value on it, but this is what I believe we provide for our participants. For anybody who's familiar with psychedelics, I'm sure you've heard the terms set, setting, and integration. So I'm going to speak a little bit more specifically and in depth about all 3 of those elements, but set and setting is where we start. So set is short for mindset. So it's essentially what are the expectations of the participant or the person who is going to ingest the psychedelic? What do they think is going to happen? What is their level of readiness? Peter and I do what we can to create an environment that is very safe and comfortable because for many of our participants, I would say the vast majority of our participants, this is a completely unique experience. I'll share with you a couple of exceptions to that. But what we do in those first 4 sessions, so they're in active treatment with us for about 9 weeks. So those first 4 weeks, we spend 2 hours once a week with our participants. And we split those 2 hours up in half. So the first hour, we talk about, we get their story, we do what's called common factors. So I'm going to talk a little bit therapeutic with you guys for a second. But common factors is essentially all of the factors that are common throughout any therapeutic approach. So for anybody who's familiar with mental health care or who has been to therapy before, your therapist has an approach that they use with you. So some of the things that we use are narrative, emotionally focused, but common factors, there are 3 things that are important in that, or kind of the cornerstone of that approach is goals, tasks, and bond. So the goals of treatment, our goals are pretty specific. At the beginning with our participants, they want to stop using cocaine or they want to drastically decrease their use. So that is essentially what we agree upon. So with the therapist or the counselor and the participant, if there is a disagreement in the goals, your treatment's going to be pretty frustrating for everybody. So you have to have agreement on that. And then there's tasks. So how do we achieve those goals? What are the interventions? What are the techniques that we're using? And we have to make sure that those techniques and interventions are relevant to the participant. They are tangible. They can be, they're logical. Because many of our participants specifically have a lot of contextual challenges. So if we're telling them to have an intervention where they drive a car to a far place, they're going to look at us and say, you haven't heard me, you don't know me, you don't get me, I told you I have trouble with transportation. So we have to make sure that we intimately understand the participant and all of their contextual factors. Then the bond. So Peter talked at length about empathy, and I think that this is really at the center of what the bond is. So we really sincerely do what we can to show our participants unconditional positive regard. And I would even venture to say that they are feeling love from Peter and myself. And I think that that's exactly what they should feel, because they are potentially going to be undergoing the most unique, meaningful, educational, spiritual experience of their life, and they have to trust that Peter and I have their back. So those are the common factors that we really work with in that first hour working with them. So we understand their story, we ask them about their family of origin, we ask them about their addiction and their experiences with it without judgment, and allow for them to have a space to just emote and talk, because that part is quite unique, as I'll share later, of just having a space to talk to a couple of people who will hear you and accept you as the person that you are. And I think that this is incredibly important, especially with addiction, because of the stigma. I mean, these are individuals who use cocaine. I mean, these are quote unquote crackheads. So they come to us as human beings, and that's exactly how we treat them and exactly how we see them. And I think that's really important to have a really therapeutic, meaningful experience in that psychedelic experience. So then we have this setting, and I'm super excited to talk to you about this, because the setting is essentially the physical space during that medication session or the psychedelic experience. So as Peter stated, we are at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. We have a clinical research unit at the university, or at UAB, I'll just say UAB. And it's sterile. It's a hospital room. So again, we have to have clearance from the IRB, or our Institutional Review Board, which basically is like, how can we cover our butts and make sure that the participants are as safe as possible? So we are in a hospital setting. We have a physician on call. So we let that person know that they are safe throughout their entire experience. But in that room, what we do is we take a pretty sterile hospital room and decorate it with decorative cloths. We have like pictures on the wall of landscapes, of mandalas, we have one that is a picture of like the inside of a church with a lot of, Peter can say exactly what it is, I forget, but a lot of painted glass and stuff, so it's just very beautiful. And we have a Persian rug on the floor, we have a salt lamp, we have a diffuser, so we try to take away as much of the sterileness of it. But in that, we also invite them to bring pictures of their loved ones, which several of our participants have taken us up on, and that will come and be relevant later. But I'm going to back up a little bit to this set. So another thing that Peter and I do is we really try to prepare our participant for this unique experience. And we have a mantra with them that is trust, let go, and be open. And if you are in a realm of existence that you've never been in, like I said, you really have to trust the people that you are with. So we really encourage them in whatever they are seeing in their experience, especially if it's scary, because much of the experience is quite euphoric, but there are moments of terror, moments that are just confusing, and we really invite the participants to go to those things. So if it's a monster or something like a dark shadow that they see, remember, these are individuals who have been addicted to cocaine for at most of them decades. So at the crux of addiction is an avoiding of things that are difficult. So that's part of the reason that they continually use. They are trying to escape from difficult emotions, from difficult situations. They're not bad people for it. They just found something that works really well and really consistently. So they're not used to facing anything that's scary. So one of the things that we think is really cool with the psychedelic experience is that we really try to encourage them to literally go up to whatever figure or feeling or whatever thing that they encounter and say, what are you here for? What can you teach me? And it's fundamentally different from the way that they engage with the world. So maybe that's something different than naturalistic use. But now what I want to do is share some of the narratives of our participants. So again, I'm going to be sharing 6 of them with you. And for more context, we are in the heart of the Bible Belt. So religion is very prominent. We are in a very religious part of the United States. So some psychedelic experiences liken a very spiritual experience. So this isn't really unique to some of our participants. So the first participant that I'm going to share with you is a 55-year-old African-American male, and he's really religious and has had many meditative experiences. So when we asked him, what was it like? He was just kind of like, it was cool. I felt joyful. I feel more hopeful about my recovery, and I feel thankful. Also, as Peter had mentioned, we do have a preset music selection or playlist for them. It's about 6 hours long with music of global influence. And they also have eye shades on because we really want this to be an internal experience. So it is fundamentally different from talk therapy, if anybody's ever experienced traditional psychotherapy. We are engaging with them as little as possible. So sometimes our participants are like, whoa, I just saw this, and we're like, cool, we'll talk to you about it later. So it's kind of like if you were sitting at a movie next to somebody and they're trying to talk to you throughout the movie, like you can talk about it later, but let's focus on the movie for right now. And that's more or less what we tell our participants. So for the rest of these narratives, what I would like for you guys to do is close your eyes so that you can kind of take this journey with me. So our next participant is a 46-year-old African-American female, and the theme of her experience was one of gratitude. So she says, "It's hard to put into words. I felt fear and paranoia. I saw lights in a picture and didn't want to be drawn into worshiping another God. I heard Yeshua, which is Aramaic for Jesus, in the music. Yeshua, number 1. The Spirit helped me understand the music. I started crying and felt like something was being pulled from me. A release, almost like God was over me, holding my hand and saying, 'It's okay, it's okay.' Crying was something I needed to do. It was a release. I was able to understand the language in the music was amazing and a gift from God. I think being able to interpret another language was wonderful. I heard a word from God. I felt so peaceful and thankful. Grateful that God has suffered for me. Grateful that God led me here. Grateful that God always had a hand in my life. This experience confirmed God's presence and guidance in my life. I believe the experience provided freedom from the struggle, freedom from the drug. Everything happened for our good so that we can help others. It's awesome. I know that. According to your faith, let it be done unto you. I knew God brought me here." So again, a lot of religious influence in that one. So we had a unique experience with our participants because the next person that I'm going to share with you is actually this participant's husband. So that'll become, it'll be good later. But so again, if you could close your eyes, this is a 49-year-old African-American male, and his theme was that of a sense of peace and readiness. So he said, I seen the peace that God has for me as well. I seen his peace, and it was amazing. It was like I was in a deep, deep sleep. I was praying and calling Jesus' name again and again. In the process, it gave me the motivation to fight. I've been beat up by the drug for so long, I decided I had had enough. I really can't describe it for real. It was amazing. I felt uncomfortable, but I was ready. I surrendered. Come on. I wanted to sit with God. The music blew me away. I fell into it and melted. It took me all the way back to the ancients. The water was amazing. The woman singing was beautiful, and the painting lit up. It opened my mind up. It was awesome. It moved my spirit. God designed this day just for me, to sit back and enjoy what he had for me. It took me somewhere. Peace. I knew I was different. I was driving more cautiously. I'm more conscious of what I'm doing. Little stuff that used to be automatic, I'm not doing. I'm eager to start the work again. So these first two were they had some allusion to the drug, to cocaine in their experience. However, the next two are very different, and these are quite rich in their imagery. So I'm going to try to move this so I can read this all right. So this next one is probably my favorite one. So this is a 41-year-old white male, and his theme is of letting go and making amends with the past. So buckle up, guys. He entitled this Through the Guts. How I got here, I don't remember. Was it from watching someone else deconstruct before my eyes? It would have set this tone having watched her skin turn into large teardrop-shaped pellets of water and float away, leaving nothing but exposed, dark, ugly, reddish-brown muscles and veins with large white eyes looking past me. I don't know, but here I was inside my own body. I don't know enough about anatomy to know where, but I knew exactly where I was. It was not a pretty red, but it was all around me. Everything around me pulsed and looked as if blood would drip like from a soaked towel if touched. I could see blood moving faster with every beat of my heart, which became less deafening with every turn of a corner. Everything moved. It felt safe within myself, but annoyed with how fucking noisy it was locked inside my skin. I was being led by someone that I'm not sure I ever saw. I just followed him down long, slightly downward pitched hallways through my own body. The surroundings turned a different color, and the high-pitched squeal of my nervous system went instantly silent, and I was in a room. The guide stepped behind me, still never showing his face. In front of me was a tall model-like figure with her hair pulled up tight in a ponytail. Like every part of my session, even her hair was a perfect pattern. Every single strand of her hair was straight and perfectly aligned with the next. Not one hair overlapped another, and all came together tightly in a perfect straight ring fastened tightly on her head. The figure was beautiful but unsettling. She showed no humanity in her face or movements, just pure method. She gutted some older, unhealthy, yellow-toned man, throwing each part to the floor in a pile. I walked past, hoping this wasn't part or figure in my trip that would give me some task. She turned her face toward me, and her eyes were aimed at mine, but I didn't feel like she was looking at me, and she said nothing. I was led into a room to meet an important political figure. Again, I felt no humanity from the person as he shook his head, or as he shook my hand. Just a cold chill simultaneous with a feeling similar to being put under from surgery. For a doctor, you realize you don't know anything about as a human being, but your life is in their hands. Sincerely helpless. Again, luckily this figure had no task for me to carry out. I was allowed to move into a room. My guide was gone. I wish I had a more literary figure to compare the next guide to, but the best I can come up with is the old preacher figure from the Poltergeist movies. But maybe my guide lacked even that much character in the face. In this section of the trip, it seems no one inside me was very human-like except me and, well, the guts we'd met in. This tall figure wanted from me. My task was sexual. I remembered the story about how one test subject refused to swim into the whirlpool and spent a 6-hour trip swimming against the current and thought, wow, this is fucking great. I get to spend 5.5 hours bargaining a blowjob with a 7-foot-old man that I felt positive had secured some sort of honored position in hell, if there's such a place. He grew even taller and more imposing with every moment I stuttered to say something. So I said okay to him, and like most of my task, I instantly ended up somewhere else the moment I was willing to face the obstacle. Outside, a beautiful marble terrace atop a mountain so high you could see the valley. It was spring, and yeah, maybe so many colorful vegetation couldn't actually be real at this elevation, but I'm on a hallucinogen, and I'm telling you, you'd also fail at describing something so perfect. It looked Greek and like a Monet painting in a Telecolor Instagram filter. Fruit everywhere. I was lying in some Caesar being fed grapes with a beautiful woman atop me, and actually a friend as well. Someone I had a very confusing relationship with. Well, I was maybe the one confused, but a real friend nonetheless. Someone I cared for and knew cared about me. She was naked, of course, and sitting on me. I didn't look at myself because, well, why would I? Then, of course, as would be the theme of this trip, where everything had a twist, she handed me a dagger and told me it was all part of my journey to stab her in the chest. She said it with such kindness, and I'd always trusted her, so I did. Then there she was, like my friend, and she had also had beautiful red hair, but it had darkened considerably after both our children had been born. I didn't even remember where we were, if there was any setting. It was just me and her. I told her I was sorry I'd not been better at being a husband, and I just felt so overwhelmed all the time since the kids. I resented that being just half the man I'd planned on being was so hard and left me so angry all the time. She told me she forgave me, that some marriages just don't work out, and that it was okay we didn't. She said we would always love each other, even if we never managed to say one more sweet word toward each other until the day one of us dies first. I remember this being the first time I cried in my session and was aware that I was also crying outside my mind. I remember tears somewhat filled up in my sleeping mask I'd been wearing and lifted it to let them run down my cheek. I remember feeling I'd let go of all my misplaced resentment I had had toward the mother of my children, and realizing the real pain was how I'd scrutinized my every word and bad decisions I'd made during the time I'd realized the marriage would be over, was ending, and after it ended. So as you can see, they're not substance related at all, but obviously great insight and a very rich experience. So the next participant I'm going to share with you is a 30-year-old white male who had a theme of a sense of oneness, importance of family, and leaving a legacy. So he says, when the psilocybin began to set in, I started feeling a weightlessness and a loss of my senses. I also felt a tingling in my head. The music began to envelop me, and I felt the loss of control of my body movements. Noises around me began to seem distant and faded. I started seeing beautiful colors, amazing geometric shapes, and flow and movement as I began to travel through time and space. I saw everything in layers, layers of color, layers of the fabric of the universe. I began to hear the violin strings as the words cosmic energy. I started to sense and experience things as they actually are, as vibrations, not stationary objects like we see with our eyes. I felt as though I was being propelled like a rocket, crossing boundaries of other dimensions and planes of existence. I kept seeing amazing shapes constantly in motion and evolving. The pyramid shape and shape of the golden ratio. The Fibonacci sequence was a constant pattern through the whole experience. I began to feel a sense of oneness with all of creation. I heard things like, I did it for my family. I felt like I was part of an all-knowing source of knowledge that I could tap into. I began to ask what's one thing I could take away from this experience and share with other people back on Earth. I also felt like I was traveling through time and I could affect past events by inserting bits of knowledge and intuition to myself and others. I felt like I was crossing over into a spiritual realm, but I cannot control my speed or my movement, as if I was a particle being tossed around through this fluid movement of reality. I felt separate from all of reality of the earth, as if I was looking down from another realm of existence. I had a vision of my son throwing up oatmeal, and later I found out that my fiance had eaten a lactation oatmeal cookie. I felt as if I had to make a decision between good and evil, and that my decision would have a great impact on humanity. I heard that I would be of great influence to others. I wondered if I could put into words the experience I had had, whether or not I should share this or if it was sacred knowledge that should not be spoken about. I felt like I experienced things on a level that cannot be comprehended in a human state, but I had a great sense that everything in the world made sense. I kept wondering and trying to figure out what was one bit of information that I can take back to Earth, and I felt a great deal of responsibility in being given that knowledge. I kept hearing over and over again, I did it for my family. And then I heard, I am son, I am my son, and to others you are your children. There are some things I saw that I cannot speak about because they're not comprehensible in a human state. I tried to make sense of some of these sayings, and the way I interpreted it was that of all the problems in the world, if you focus on one thing, everything else will fall into place. That one thing is your family. If you make your children and your relationships a priority, that is the greatest achievement that you can attain. I thought of a couple verses from the Bible during this time. One was the parable of the sower and of the seeds, that you plant everything with your stay on earth. It was very clear to me that earth was and our perception of the world is a very tiny piece of the entire universe, and that our understanding of the world is very limited. The things of this world are temporary, but souls live on forever. I also thought of when Jesus was baptized and the heavens opened and God spoke and said, "This is my son in which I am well pleased." I thought about children at a certain age and how they ask why for everything. And I saw that one of man's greatest questions is why, or maybe one of my greatest questions is why, and the answer is love, and I did it for my family. I also felt like consciousness was everywhere and everything was conscious. Why does sperm swim to the egg? It has one goal, continuing life for the sake of family. I thought about my son a lot and missed him deeply. I saw the nipple in the shape of a pyramid, golden and sacred and a source of light. I thought about my kids laugh so much. I thought about why kids laugh so much and when they're young and happy. It may be because when they come into this world, children are all-knowing and so simple in their thinking. Also, the beauty in life is that we can make a choice. We have the freedom to make decisions at will. The flip side of this is that there will be pain and suffering in the world, but we have the ability to make changes for the positive. I had a strong sense that the decision I was making coming out of this experience will have a great impact on myself and the world for generations to come. And if you want to continue life on this earth, you can build a legacy through your children. By pouring your heart into people, loving others, and making family a priority, you in turn pour your heart into the rest of the world for the good of humanity. So last but not least, I have a narrative for you from a 39-year-old African-American female, and hers was an experience of self-compassion. So keep in note that we invite our participants to bring in pictures of their loved ones. So this one is where that comes into play. Here we go. There was a song that was very gruesome in my spirit. It was a very low place. It was almost demonic sounding, and God was showing me, this is where I brought you from. This is where you went in your addiction. This is where it took you. And after I had to live it out and saw it and heard it, the music rose up, it went all the way up to a high note, and it brought me out of the valley and into the light, and I was like, whoa. It was like a roller coaster, and it's like, here I am now. I'm out of there. I'm out of that ditch. I'm out of that dungeon. And the music did it for me. It was a boost in spirit. It actually did it. I really can't put into words what it did. You had to hear it. You had to experience it. Then there was another song that made me think about a cousin I had. She was a diabetic, and she did not want to accept the fact that she was diabetic, and she got sick. And before she died, she said to me, "You got to stop this. You're going to die, and you've already embarrassed us. You need to stop this before you end up dead." And I can't remember what song it was, but I had to take my blindfold off and look at her because I knew she was speaking to me through that song. And once I looked her in the eyes, I knew I was doing the right thing. And I knew she knew I was doing the right thing, and she was pleased. She was actually pleased. She had a harsh delivery, but her message was, "Get it together, little cousin, get it together." By the time she presented it, it was harsh, but I knew that she wanted to have the best for me, and that's what led me to get her picture. God led me. Out of all of the cousins I have, he wanted me to get her picture because he knew that song was going to signify that I was doing the right thing and that she was pleased. And at that moment, I had done what she wanted me to do. Later in her experience, she had seen herself as a 16-year-old. She said, the baby 16-year-old, she didn't show up very much, but I felt her pain. I felt the first time her feelings were hurt, and she was about 6. I felt that during the medication session. I felt the pain that she felt. I felt when it all started, and then I felt the destruction that came along with that. And then again, I felt when it all came out, and I'm out of that. I can only use that experience to help someone else. I can't let it continue to bring me down. I can't use the fact that I was molested and smoked crack. That's not an excuse anymore. My feelings can't get hurt. I can't get in a bad breakup and then use crack. That's not an excuse. So those are the narratives that we have so far. So I'll talk, I'm just gonna show you this one more time. Maybe 2 more times. So this week's 5 through 8. So we have 4 weeks of 2-hour sessions with them once a week to, again, have them feel as comfortable as they can with us so that they trust us in that medication session. And then on that 5th week is when they have the medication session, and that's about an 8-hour day for them with us. And then after that, we have 1 session that's called integration, and then we have 4 follow-up sessions with them. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about that integration piece. So integration is essentially taking the insights that were garnered in that psychedelic experience and making them into actionable change. So one of the things that we notice in our treatment is that the substance is very primary in the prior to the medication session for those who have received the psilocybin that we know of. And then it becomes very secondary after, where they are more focused on connection and relationships. So essentially what we do is, like, they'll come out and say, wow, I have not been doing work that I love. I have not been the partner, the parent, the sibling, the citizen that I would like to be, that I know I can be. So that, for us, we're limited in our ability to help in some ways because, we're at an institution, but we have resources that we can help them with. So for example, if they're trying to get government assistance, sometimes when you drop the doctor title, people answer phones quicker. So we want to help them with that, and that's from their asking for us to help them. The last 6 months in this trial are follow-ups. So we have a 90 days after the end of treatment and 180 days at the end of treatment. We ask them, one of the portions that we do beyond some quantitative measures is an interview. In the world or in the field of addiction, we really talk about positive outcomes in terms of abstinence. So did you minimize use? What's the longest period of time you went without using? And I personally believe, and I believe Peter's on the same page with me of this, is that that's quite limiting. So what we ask them, and this is just one example of a question that we ask that has several probes, but we want to know, what's their life looking like? And do they attribute any of that to the treatment that they underwent? And if not, what are some extra therapeutic things that happen to them? What are your relationships like? What's your living situation? What is your income? Has any of that changed? Your sense of belonging, your sense of purpose? Because I think that we're missing some of the elements that can be quite positive for an individual that's not substance specific. So at the end of treatment, we do also ask them questions about how they felt treatment went and what was beneficial about that. And I want to share with you some of the things that the individuals who received the psilocybin said. So one of the themes is the most beneficial part of the program being both the therapeutic alliance, a feeling of safety, and also being able to acknowledge and express their emotions. So one of our participants said that the most beneficial part of the program was a lot of self-awareness, learning a lot about my thought patterns and just things, self-defeating habits and thinking patterns that I've developed over the years, identifying them and learning to work through them. As it progressed, it was less and less about quitting the substance and more about just self-acceptance and improvement. The substance became secondary. Another individual said, I would say the most beneficial things were 1, the drug administration, and I would also say 2, the care and time that Peter and Sara took to work through a lot of issues and overcome those things. I would say that just the questions they asked and the amount of time spent with me and also being able to reach out to them, even if I had a moment where I needed someone to talk to or anything like that, they were always available to talk through things. So that speaks to the relationship building and the fact that we do accomplish more together than on our own. Another individual said, I would say the one-on-one counseling with the doctors, being able to dig into my feelings and my experiences and just express them. Another said, I think that communication, the setting that we were just sitting and just to express myself and talk among you guys, the sessions. Lastly, someone said, just to be able to learn about myself and be clean and sober and nicotine-free. So again, they're with us in active treatment for about 9 weeks, but we follow them for 6 months after that. So I want to speak to some of the lasting effects that we've seen so far. And these are some of the themes that we pulled out were interpersonal and intrapersonal changes. So one participant said, I've got more hope now. I've got more hope than I ever had. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's just getting to the light, and the light just consumes. Now it's just the light shining down through that and reaching at me. I had forgiven myself. I can't worry about it. Just let it go. Whatever I've done, it's done. It's like a new slate right now. And knowing that I've been forgiven through God. So once I've been forgiven through God, He can handle the rest. Another participant said, there's more honest, upfront friendships than there used to be. I was very pensive, negative toward myself. I don't understand regrets, I was stuck in a lot of regret and a lot of guilt and shame over things, and I would hold on to my failures and quickly forget all of my accomplishments and now I view them as quite equal. I now think learning from a failure is a good thing, but not holding on to it. We're not attaching our self-worth to failure. Another participant said, I have come to a greater acceptance and just to be at peace with what happened in my addiction. Another said, I found peace from my malice. I found peace. I look for peace. It's hard to explain, but I found peace. Lastly, someone said, my self-esteem has rocketed. I don't feel like I'm a victim anymore. I don't let people walk over me anymore. I stand up, even if it's uncomfortable, because I don't like confrontation, but sometimes you have to be confrontational. So I would say one of the cornerstone characteristics of addiction is a belief that this is how things are always going to be, and there really isn't a belief in one's ability to change. So this was a theme that was pulled out from some of these interviews, is the individuals believed that they had the ability to change, and it was instilling a sense of hope in them. So one person said, if I changed, everyone else can. I'm not that special, you know. I came into this thinking that the script and the character development for everyone I knew was already done. It was all destined to be in that shit. Everyone was living in the Groundhog Day movie. It's bullshit. Great movie, though. Another said, if they take the time out to just deal with the people and understand the people that they are dealing with and they stay focused, it can happen, no problem. It shouldn't be a problem. It can work. I know it works because it worked for me. I've been through a bunch of programs before now, several extensive scheduled drug programs where you just study the word day and night. Another said, I used to be a firm believer that people don't change and they're set in their ways. But I think you can go through experiences, positive or negative, that definitely shape the future. So I was under the belief that I was probably going to be doing drugs my whole life, and I didn't care too much about things that should matter in this world. And so I think just looking at myself, I am an example of someone who changed by my experience, and it can be for the positive. Others have the same ability to change. Another said, I know that anybody can change even the worst of what you see today. Don't judge because it could change in the future. you could see that same person and be like, wow, God is so awesome. He can do anything. And lastly, our last participant said, yes, I watched my husband change. So that's all the narratives I have for you. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to field them.